She pretended to be confused while her family stole everything. Then they found out who she really was. They thought she was losing her mind, an easy target, a confused old woman who couldn't tell Monday from Thursday, couldn't remember her own account numbers, couldn't possibly understand what they were doing right in front of her face. She remembered everything. Diane Harlow turned 73 on a Tuesday in March, the kind of quiet birthday where you wake up alone, make your own coffee, and wonder if anyone will remember. They remembered, because 3 days later, her phone started ringing. Her daughter Jessica, her son Marcus, even her grandson Tyler, who hadn't called in 8 months, suddenly wanted to check in on Grandma. And then came the visits. Every Sunday, like clockwork. For a woman who'd spent the last 5 years listening to silence echo through a 4-bedroom house, it felt like love rediscovering its way home. Her kitchen filled with voices again, footsteps on the stairs, laughter she didn't have to imagine. She wanted to believe it was real. But Diane Harlow hadn't survived 42 years in hospital administration by ignoring patterns. See, here's what most people don't understand about the elderly. We think aging makes you forget, makes you miss things, makes you slow. It doesn't. It sharpens you. Because when you've lived through decades of people trying to take advantage, trying to manipulate, trying to smile while they slide a knife between your ribs, you develop a sixth sense, a radar for bullshit so finely tuned it could detect a lie from 3 rooms away. Diane had that radar, and it was screaming. The visits always happened on Sundays, always between 2 and 4 p.m., always started with the same questions. How are you feeling, Mom? Are you remembering to take your medications? Have you been managing the bills okay? Health questions before happiness questions, every single time. Then came the casual suggestions. You know, Mom, banking has gotten so complicated. All these online portals and security codes must be exhausting to keep track of. Have you thought about simplifying things? Maybe letting one of us help manage the accounts? Dad would have wanted you to have help. You shouldn't have to carry all this alone. They said it gently, wrapped in concern, delivered with soft voices and softer smiles. But Diane heard what they weren't saying. What they didn't know was that she'd spent 40 decades in an environment where one misplaced decimal point could kill someone, where attention to detail wasn't a skill, it was survival. She'd been managing 6-figure hospital budgets when Jessica was still in diapers. But she didn't tell them that. She just smiled, nodded, and listened. Because here's where it gets interesting. The requests started getting more specific. Marcus brought paperwork, power of attorney documents, just a formality, Mom, in case something happens, for emergencies. Jessica started talking about streamlining her finances, consolidating accounts, making things easier to manage. Tyler, 26 years old and working part-time at a gym, suddenly had opinions about her investment portfolio. They brought forms for her to sign, explanations that sounded helpful but felt rushed, questions about assets she'd never mentioned. And then came the slip, the moment everything crystallized. It was Jessica, week 7 of the Sunday visits. They were sitting in the living room and Jessica was explaining why Diane should add her name to the checking account. That way, if anything happens, I can handle your expenses, the house payment, the utilities, the... House payment? Diane interrupted softly. What? I paid off this house in 2009. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Oh, right. Of course, I meant the property taxes. You know what I meant. But Diane knew something Jessica didn't. She'd never mentioned her property taxes to anyone, which meant Jessica had been looking, digging, accessing information she shouldn't have had access to yet. That was the moment Diane stopped being patient and started being precise. Now, what Diane did next is something everyone watching this should pay attention to, because this is how you handle betrayal when you're smart enough to see it coming. She didn't confront them, didn't cry, didn't accuse. She verified. See, Diane still had friends from the hospital, People who'd worked in finance, legal, human resources. People who knew how to read documents, trace transactions, identify red flags. She made calls from her bedroom when no one was visiting. She drove to the bank, the same bank she'd used for 30 years, and asked to review every piece of activity on her accounts, every authorized user request, every inquiry. What she found made her blood run cold. Jessica had already tried to add herself to 2 accounts. The requests had been denied because they required Diane's signature, but they'd been submitted with forged initials. Marcus had contacted her financial advisor 3 times, claiming Diane was experiencing cognitive decline and asking about transferring assets into a trust he would manage. Tyler had requested copies of her will from her attorney's office, told them it was for family planning purposes. They weren't planning to help her, they were planning to replace her. But here's what they didn't understand. Diane wasn't just documenting their attempts, she was building a case. Over the next 6 weeks, Diane became exactly what they wanted her to be: confused, forgetful, a little slower with her answers. She started asking them to explain things she already understood, let them help her with tasks she'd been handling independently for years, played the role of the grateful aging mother who was just so thankful her children cared enough to step in. She wanted to believe it was real. Meanwhile, she did 3 things. First, she worked with a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse. They restructured everything: her assets, her accounts, her legal protections, built a fortress they'd never see coming. Second, she installed cameras, small ones, in the living room, the kitchen, her home office, recorded every conversation, every visit, every attempt to pressure her into signing something. Third, she created bait, a fake document left on her desk, power of attorney paperwork that appeared to give Jessica complete control of her estate, unsigned, just waiting for a signature. She mentioned it casually during one Sunday visit. "Oh, I've been meaning to sign that. The lawyer dropped it off last week." Jessica's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "I can help you with that, Mom. Let me just grab a pen." Diane watched her hand move towards the document, watched her pick it up, scan it, probably calculating what it all meant. "Actually," Diane said quietly, "I think I'll wait till next week. I want to read it one more time." Jessica's smile tightened. "Mom, you've already read it. The lawyer explained everything. It's just a formality." "I know, sweetheart, but I'd feel better reading it again." That night, the document disappeared from her desk, and Diane's bedroom camera caught exactly who took it. The reckoning came on a Sunday. Of course it did. They arrived at 2 p.m., same as always. Jessica, Marcus, Tyler, all wearing expressions of concerned children dutifully caring for their aging mother. Diane had made coffee, set out cookies. The house smelled of cinnamon, warm and inviting. "I wanted to talk to all of you together," she settled into her armchair, "about the future." They leaned in. This was the moment they'd been building toward, the moment she'd finally admit she needed help, needed them. "I've been doing some thinking," Diane continued, her voice soft, measured, "about my estate, about who I can trust." "That's smart, Mom, really smart," Jessica nodded encouragingly. "So I made some changes." The room went very still. "What kind of changes?" Marcus asked carefully. Diane smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Well, for starters, I moved all my assets into an irrevocable trust, one that distributes everything to charity on my death. St. Vincent's Hospital, where I worked for 42 years, will receive the bulk of it." The color drained from Jessica's face. "You what?" "I also filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Elder abuse, they call it. Comes with criminal penalties in this state." Tyler stood up. "Grandma, what are you—" "Sit down, Tyler." Something in her voice made him sit. Diane opened a folder on the table beside her. "I have recordings of every visit for the past 3 months, transcripts of conversations where you pressured me to sign documents under false pretenses, bank records showing unauthorized access attempts. emails between the three of you discussing how to handle me. I also have video of Jessica taking legal documents from my home office without permission. That's theft, by the way, even if it's family. The silence in that room could have stopped a clock. Marcus tried first. "Mom, we were trying to help." "You were trying to help yourselves." Her voice wasn't angry. It was worse than angry. It was disappointed. "You came to my home, ate my food, smiled at me, and the entire time you were calculating how much you'd get when I died, or better yet, how much you could take before that." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, probably. "We're family." Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't lie to financial advisors. Family doesn't steal from someone who spent their entire life taking care of them. Diane stood, 73 years old, 5'4", 130 pounds. She'd never looked taller. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave. You're going to stop calling, stop visiting, stop pretending you care. And if I see or hear from any of you again without my explicit permission, those recordings go to the police, the bank, and every local news station that'll listen." She walked to the door, opened it. "Time's up." They left, one by one. Jessica crying, Marcus silent, Tyler looking at his grandmother like he was seeing her for the first time. Maybe he was. Diane Harlow still lives in that house. She still has coffee alone most mornings, still spends quiet evenings in rooms that feel too big. But something changed after that Sunday. Not in her, and how the world treated her. Because once people realize you're not easy to break, they stop trying. See, the mistake her family made wasn't just underestimating her intelligence, it was confusing patience with weakness, confusing silence with surrender. Diane had simply been waiting, watching, documenting, giving them enough rope to hang themselves with. Because here's what most people never learn. Age doesn't erase wisdom, it concentrates it. And the grandmother they thought they could manage was the same woman who'd survived every version of life that tried to take something from her. She'd just learned which battles were worth waiting for. What would you do in her situation? Leave a comment below. And if this story made you think twice about how you treat the elderly in your life, good. That's the point. Thanks for watching.